今年2月，彭博新能源财经研究组织公布了最新的研究报告，继去年全球绿色能源投资超过1兆美元之后，今年可以预见，全球在清洁能源投资的金额将有可能首次超过化石燃料的支出。尽管取得这样杰出的进展，但在能源转型技术的支出上，该研究报告还是提出呼吁，各国仍需加大投资力度，才有可能实现2050年净零排放的目标，以应对气候变迁。而加速全球能源显著转变的原因，除了气候变迁步伐加快、全球需求上升和国际危机这几个因素之外，另外还有一个原因，就是战争。
Energy supply and infrastructure facilities remain one of the main targets of Russian attacks in Ukraine. Russia has been using energy blackmail since the start of its full-scale invasion. Russia's use of energy as a weapon is likely to remain a tool of coercion, according to British intelligence.
For the past 2 winters, the Kremlin has targeted Ukraine's civilian energy infrastructure, using ballistic missiles like the Iskander to hit power stations, gas supplies and electricity networks. The World Bank says over half of Ukraine's power infrastructure has been damaged. The cost of repair, an estimated £9.5 billion.
根据国际非政府组织 Global Witness 全球见证在俄乌战争爆发2年后的最新观察，自从战争开打以来，欧洲和美国石油和天然气巨头的利润已超过25兆美元。而即使俄罗斯攻击破坏了许多乌克兰的能源基础设施，乌克兰仍没有放弃跟世界同步，会扩大在生能源领域努力，并实践对清洁能源的承诺。而让乌克兰可以在能源项目昂首不向霸权低头的原因，或许跟太阳公平的在世界各国升起，与风力不会因为国际边界而缺席有关。
Across the Andes in Peru, the Ashaninka indigenous group sought to gain energy independence after facing unreliable diesel deliveries. In 2014, they partnered with nonprofit Electrify to install a solar microgrid serving over 1,500 citizens across 6 remote villages. Unique among microgrids, this one is 100% community-owned and managed. In California's sweltering Sonoran Desert, cattle rancher Bill Hewlett noticed his unfenced lands faced dim prospects, except for one abundant resource. Starting in the 1980s, Hewlett leased arid parcels to solar companies, kickstarting North America's first utility-scale solar farm on the flat, dry lake bed north of Los Angeles. Soon neighboring farms followed suit, leasing once vacant desert for solar installations that blend seamlessly with grazing. Out in the wild North Atlantic lies the remote Isle of Aiag, a broodingly beautiful Scottish island just a hop from mainland Scotland. For decades, fuel had to be barged in for Aig's meager hydro plant, often disrupting life when bad weather halted deliveries. Tired of instability, in 1997 islanders banded together to purchase their island from absent landlords. In the 2 decades since, through dogged persistence, community spirit and cooperation with partners, Aig's 100 residents have transitioned completely off-grid using renewables. Today, the Isle derives 100% of its electricity from solar, wind, and hydro. A microgrid of batteries and backup gensets ensure power always flows.
可是不论是哪一种形式的绿色能源，想要全面取代传统燃料能源，基础建设得先达到一定的数量水准，才有可能实践。不过，知易行难，各国目前都有自己的问题。
Louise, I mean, very clear that the green economy seems to be good business for Britain.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I think we see great opportunities from the net zero economy, but actually what we wanted to do is look at the value of the net zero economy already at the moment. And I think you can see from the report that we produced here at CBI Economics and together with our partners at ECIU is really showing that big benefit to the economy.
I just wanted to dig down into part of that because one of the interesting things is the pretty much even geographical spread. Because when sometimes people talk about the green and green issues, they think, oh, it's only for the rich in the south or whatever. This works for manufacturing areas of the north.
That's right, exactly. So we were really pleased to be able to see that from the report and dig into that next level of detail down. So it's showing not only that impact for the UK economy as a whole, But actually, as you say, there's no north-south divide here. And actually, if you're looking at the regions outside of London, those are often the ones that are already benefiting a lot more from this. And I think one of the things we were really pleased to be able to show in the report as well is the higher level of productivity that we also get from those jobs. So not only those jobs being really well geographically spread, but really high quality, high paid jobs as well.
One of the things that I'd like to dig into here is whether the shilly-shallying, I'm going to call it, from both parties we've seen a little bit on their commitment to spend on green tech. What impact do you think that has?
Yeah, so I think, like I say, we see real great opportunities from the net zero economy, and our members are definitely really keen to be able to see those opportunities realised within the UK. Actually, globally, you can see there's a lot of competition to win these net zero prizes. You've got kind of lots of packages in the US and EU that we are competing with. And so what we would really like to be able to see going forward is to make sure that net zero doesn't become politicised, as perhaps it is in danger of being done going into this election year, and actually
So you're quite worried about what you've seen a bit of the parties using it as a political football, are you?
We're definitely concerned if that continues to be the case, and what members would like to see is that long-term commitment to the net zero targets, and actually thinking about how we can provide more certainty of the path to get there.
If we don't get that, are we in danger of losing the net zero pound or net zero dollar, and it ends up getting invested elsewhere?
Well, that's it. I mean, the UK at the moment has some great opportunities in terms of the natural capital we have, the industry know-how, but that international investment that at the moment we do see coming to the UK is in danger of finding homes elsewhere if we're not able to keep at the forefront on this journey.
The CBI, the Confederation of British Industry, is often seen as a natural ally of the party of business, the Conservative Party. Do you feel they've rather dropped the ball in this space?
As I say, I think what we'd like to see is that this isn't a party political issue, and that actually we do see consensus across the political parties on that. I can appreciate that might be difficult going into an election year, but I think the prizes are so big in this space that that's what we need to see.
In the 1980s, the country experienced on average a $1 billion disaster every 4 months, but now experiences one every 3 weeks. We've set a new record with $25 billion worth of disasters in 1 year. Where are we going here?
Thing about climate change is it's very rarely just one thing. You get kind of things layering one on top of the other, and each layer makes things a little worse, and then you end up with a $1 billion disaster. I mean, we saw it in Hawaii.
There's a lot of misinformation and disinformation cited by green energy opponents regarding solar panels and wind turbines. What are some of the debunked concerns that are still being raised?
I think it was North Carolina blocked all wind for a while because they said, well, the military won't be able to land its planes if there are wind turbines going, and no, it was fine. So that's not an issue. It's true that some birds and bats are killed by wind turbines, but actually it's the numbers are smaller than are often said, and fracking and other fossil fuel extraction methods are actually more dangerous to birds. Solar is growing more than wind because you can put it a lot more places, and solar has just gotten so insanely efficient. It's the cheapest way to produce energy at this point in the United States, bar none. If you say, we can't build solar because it's going to take away all the land and we won't have enough food, well, perhaps we could grow a little less corn for ethanol, put in some solar there, and we'd end up net positive for energy.
Well, you spoke with a family in Kansas who thought they found a way to hold on to their land rather than selling it off by agreeing to lease land to a solar farm. They've run into some very fierce opposition to this plan. Tell me what's been happening with them.
They're one of a bunch of families that were approached by a solar developer that wanted to build a pretty big utility scale solar farm. And they frankly didn't think it was going to be that big a deal, but boy, was it. And now it's been going on 5 years of meetings and people opposing it. You and I might look at a beautiful field and think, oh, it's so beautiful. A farmer looks at it and like, that is money. The Kanokis have been on that land since the 1860s. And then have people who have come in and say, well, you can't do anything to destroy the view. And the farmers are like, what are you talking about? This is my land and I can do anything I want with it because it's my livelihood. And the neighbors, many of whom have moved to the rural areas because they want to embrace the ambiance and the lifestyle of the rural areas, are saying, well, no, you can't. Big change is hard. I mean, if you love a place, it's hard to see it change and shift. There's a couple of university groups that are working to try and help counties figure out, well, how do we accommodate both clean energy and what people want? And really, I thought a very thoughtful thing that came out at one of those meetings was you can only move at the speed of trust. It's going to take a lot of talking with community members and building up trust. We're going to have to find a way to figure out where to build this in ways that we can all live with.
Well, as you've reported, as of 2022, 38% of our electricity came from clean energy. You've touched on nuclear and hydropower. How much is coming from those sources, and should we count on those sources going forward?
What America looks like on the other side of the energy transition is actually better, cheaper energy, cleaner. It's not going to be horrific, but as our research found over the last year and a half, people are very resistant to that change. And there are forces that are aiding and abetting that resistance. You know, it's not enough at this point. I mean, it's 15% of counties. That's not enough to derail U.S. efforts to get to 100% carbon neutral energy. But especially for solar, the number of counties that have stopped it is increasing a lot every year since 2021. And if that trend continues, the experts I've talked to said, well, you know, it's not worrisome yet, but boy, it could get worrisome. And we need to watch this. And we need, again, talking about that group that's convening to try and figure out how do we contend with people's concerns where they live, but also build what we need to build in the places that make sense to do it.
即使光电技术源于美国贝尔实验室，即使全球第一支风力发电机源自于苏格兰科学家的发明，即使发展清洁能源是世界各国的共识，但是发展至今，仍然有不少国家认为，绿色能源为中国提供了一个独特的崛起机会。有媒体分析，这是因为中国把能源安全视为主要弱点，在这几年积极发展新能源技术造成的。所以，当各国政要惊觉中国控制超过80%的太阳能板关键零件，在2022年供应了全球近60%的风力涡轮机，是热泵的主要供应商，在多种关键矿产中的产量居全球领先地位，就连全球前10大锂电池制造商，中国也占了6席。这时候，各国才想到要断开中国制造，提议设置贸易壁垒，以实现能源自由。可是，面对净零排放10%目标的迫近，有人从不同的角度提出看法。
So, how did China get so far ahead? Well, in the early 2000s, the country was experiencing a severe shortage of one of the main raw materials needed to make solar panels, polysilicon. It was buying it from other countries at a very high price. So, Beijing took action. Making polysilicon became a national priority. Local governments fast-tracked permission for the construction of new plants, and state-owned companies and banks poured money into the new facilities. And as a result, manufacturing capacity shot up. Here's how much, according to Chinese outlet PV Time, one of the many who track the growth.
China has been, in a sense, the perfect country to do this because the political system allows for the integration of consumption and production policies, and it allows for long-term thinking.
Richard Black is a director of policy and strategy at global energy think tank Ember.
There are some countries in the world where this probably couldn't have happened because they don't have those things at all.
China was subsidizing heavily solar modules, so they came up with dumping prices on the market, and there was no control from the European side on it.
Claudia Kempfert is an economist and energy expert.
The European solar producers, especially the German ones, could not really compete with China.
European solar panel makers like Energy and SolarWorld struggled to stay afloat. As China took steps to increase its manufacturing power, Europe took steps to protect its market from cheaper Chinese products. In 2013, the EU imposed limits on tariff-free goods coming from the country, but it was too little, too late.
In Germany, we lost over 100,000 jobs in the solar sector because of this heavy subsidizing of solar modules in China. And we had a huge debate of whether or not the energy transition is costly or should we do it or not. And all this came to the situation that we were not the solar market leaders anymore.
But is it so bad if China dominates the market? Today, solar-powered energy is the cheapest form of electricity for the majority of countries that use it, and that's thanks to China's output. And the price of installation keeps dropping. Estimates put the cost somewhere between $300 and $900 per kilowatt by 2030. Though it's not all positive. Japanese electronics giant Panasonic shut down production at its solar panel factories at home and in Malaysia a few years ago, choosing to outsource it to a subcontractor instead. And the U.S. arm of South Korea's LG shut down its plant in Huntsville, Alabama in 2022, citing higher costs for materials and logistics, along with severe supply issues.
We should not be too dependent on imports of solar modules and produce our own solar modules in Europe, in Germany as well, and keep the jobs also here. And there is a market advantage if we would do so and not keep or leave the whole market dominance to one nation, which is China.
If you're a government that's in favour of international trade, and most European governments are in favour of international trade in principle, then you can't really complain when companies in another country start producing something that you want and they're producing it really cheaply and so on, and exporting it to you. That's just part of life.
现在，绿色能源战争已经成为各国角力的新战场。但是，清洁能源并不只局限在风光发电，还包含核电、氢能、生质能、水力发电。市场发展项目更是无限宽广。在世界陷入断开中国制造的泥淖时，如何逃离，往更前面的市场迈进？相信已经有聪明的商人在动脑筋。